All right, so now we are going to update our cart. So when we change things in here, we can actually see it automatically update. At least we're going to automatically update. First off, the line totals will automatically update too, but we're not going to worry about the actual numbers quite yet. So let's go back into Sublime Text and we're going to take a look here. The first thing I want to do is I want to change where this input hidden type is going to be. I'm going to put it into the same column as all the other inputs, only because it really drastically changes everything. It makes it a lot harder to select certain items, especially this hidden input, when we're working with it as we were. I'm also going to put the form inside of here. So the entire form element is inside of that one column, the entire thing. So if we refresh in here, and we change something and hit update item, it's still working. So the default action is still working. It's just not exactly the way it was before, only because of what we're doing here with jQuery. So now what we see is we already have this item change button, right? Or this item change call where we fade in that button. I'm going to comment this out for a second and go back into product detail. And we're going to copy the entire thing except for the actual action, which was the clicked button. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this. We can bring in the event default, that doesn't matter actually. And we're going to paste this in here. So I'm going to comment this out. Form data. Now in this one, we don't actually have to worry so much about form data. We can do it that way, but I'm going to show you another way to do it. And we're going to first off say item. So we want the variable of item and then the variable of quantity. So this is, of course, going to be the quantity that's based off of this. So quantity, QTY, is just this dot val. So this is getting the value of whatever the selector, in this case the quantity is, and that value is based off of this number right here, which is something the user can change. And the next one is getting the item. So really the item is a hidden input here. As we see right here, it's a hidden input, and it's the only hidden input in this form. So we can do a very simple call here, and instead of adding an ID or a class like what we did here, we can just say this dot previous. So this is or dot prev. This is going to get the input, and we'll say type equals to single quote hidden and close bracket. So this right here is how you actually call an input without referring to its class. Like if you might remember to call like an H1 tag, all you have to do is H1, and that will call all of the H1 tags in there. But if you did .prev, this would get the previous H1 tag. Now if we had the input outside of this TD tag, you might have some issues getting this actually to work, which is why we changed it, just to make it more simple for us. So now that we have this data, item, and QTY, we can actually set var data equal to a dictionary, and we'll say item is item, and QTY is QTY. And granted, this is a JSON dictionary, that's why it's set up this way. So we put data, and now our actual data down here is also data. Cool. So this is going to send us virtually the exact same thing. So we should be able to try it now and actually see what's coming out, and we'll see this console data as well. So let's go back into our form, and let's just change something here. So I changed it to 4, and we got a little error down here. It's saying QYT is not defined, and this is QTY, just a little typing error there. And granted, if you couldn't find that error right away, it does tell you where it is. So if you clicked on this, it would show you right where that error is, which is really cool about the console in Chrome. All right, so if we refresh in here, let's change it again. So change it again and refresh, and it's still going back. Why is it happening? Well, it's actually because of this. So that right there is, every time I refresh it, it's going to change it back to 5 or 3 or whatever. If I change the other one and refresh, it does keep it at 2. So what we need to do is account for that. So in our views, our return should actually be, if the item is all saved and created, we should just send it back to the actual same page. So we'll return HTTP response redirect. Actually, we'll return the reverse. So I'm going to import from Django.core.url resolvers, import reverse. And now I'll say if not request.is Ajax. So if it's not Ajax, then we're going to turn HTTP response redirect to reverse of cart. Of course, we could also do, just want to show you that's one way you can do the reverse. The other way is return cart item .cart .get absolute URL. And that, of course, would assume that our cart had get absolute URL, which it does not. But that would be another way if you wanted to implement that. And you could do that same implementation for the cart item itself, which, again, does not have an absolute URL instance method. Okay, so now that we've got this will at least get rid of, when we do manual calls for updating the quantity, it will actually allow us to get rid of that. So if I refresh in here, it goes away, it does update everything, and now when I actually update this, it will update it, and then if I hit refresh, it's going to stay with that new update. One thing that is also kind of cool, if I hit enter here, it also updates. So it's still going to do that same get call. Everything still works exactly as planned, but in the only case here, if I hit enter, it actually does refresh the page instead of doing Ajax, where if I'm changing these are actually changing the value as it goes. As we see in the console, it's actually doing it too. So what we can do is actually update our line item total inside of our view. So the request context, what we want to change here is I'm going to cut this out, and I'll say data equals to whatever data we want to pass here. And this is going to be completely up to you on what data you want to come back for this. But I'm going to do something like, first off, I'll do line total. So line total being equal to, and this is going to be cart item dot line item total. I believe that's what we called it. Let's look back in our models, and that's line item total. And this might be none, so I'm just going to cut this and say try that. And I'll say total equals to that, except total is none. The only reason it might be none is if we delete it, right? So there's that. And if it is deleted, it's not going to matter as far as showing that. So we'll have to do some stuff for that. All right, so now that we have this line item total, let's go back into our product detail. And instead of this message, we are going to just update our total. So I'm going to do a few things to the row that we have for this form in general. Oops, not in product detail, but in view. We're going to go into this row, and I'll say ID equals to item dash, and it's going to be item dot ID. So it's going off of this item. It's the same thing as, actually we should have it go off of the same iteration ID instead of that ID. So we'll do item.item.id. So it's the exact same thing as the hidden input. So we don't have to call anything else. So first off, I'll say if data deleted. So if data deleted, then we want to remove the row. We'll just fade out. So we're going to get the ID of item dash plus item, which is the ID, if you remember correctly, dot fade out. Okay? Else, so if it's not deleted, it's either going to be added or whatever. Now we can actually update the item line total. So I'll add another ID here. We'll say item line total dash item ID. And then we can update that. So it's virtually the same as this. So instead it's item line total dash item ID. And then we'll just put text being data dot Look back in our view. We called it line total. Back into view, line total. There we go. So this is actually going to update how this is. So cart item is, this should actually be total here, not cart item. All right, so now we've got that data. So let's go back in. And I'm going to change this to 3. And notice the price is changing as I change it. And it's fairly fast, which is cool. It is not updating the subtotal. So let's go ahead and add subtotal. And this is going to come from the cart. So this is, again, we're going to try again and say subtotal equals to cart item.cart.subtotal, except subtotal equals to none. Finally, subtotal. And now back into our view. We're just going to add the subtotal as a class of subtotal, or maybe we can just add the ID as well. So ID equals to subtotal. And now in here, we can go $ hash subtotal dot text equals to data dot subtotal. Refresh, change this, and notice the subtotal is changing along with it. Cool, and notice I deleted one on accident and it went away. All right, so now the next thing that I want to do is just fix the message. So the message that's coming through, right now it's not a very good message. That's both for product detail as well as the cart. We want to show a message like just, I mean, granted they can move it and it's changing things, but I want to give them at least an alert of some kind to show them quantity has been successfully changed. If you have any questions on what we did here, let us know. Otherwise, let's keep going.